Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Buenas tardes, aloha. Welcome to the fourth and final installment of the 2020 NYSOA Summer Educational Series. My name is Lance Van Heitzma, and I will be co-moderating this webinar with my dear good friend, Mark Cahan. Today's show is a reunion show recapping the previous 3 sessions regarding the rule changes. Many of you have already attended a webinar series this summer sponsored by NYSOA, but for those of you that are new, I'm going to kick it over Mark for the rules of engagement.
And I'm going to throw it right over to Tori because she's so much better at this than I am, and everyone's tired of hearing my voice.
Thanks, Mark. So as far as rules of engagement, hold on one second. Let's mute Chris since I'm sitting next to him. Great. As far as rules of engagement, if you've joined us in any of the webinars, very similar as far as process, how to get involved in the conversation. So if you look down at the bottom of your screen, you're going to see a chat as well as a Q&A feature. So if you click on the chat feature, and it looks like many of you are already on there saying hello and typing in who you are and where you're from, that's fantastic. So keep that conversation going. That's really where we get to have dialogue with each other, is in the chat. If you have any specific questions that you'd like to add for the team here today to answer, then use the Q&A feature. It's much easier for the moderators, Lance and Mark, to be able to differentiate what are questions and what is just dialogue and conversation. So again, the chat feature at the bottom, you'll see, click on that. Go ahead and type in your name. I see everybody. Hello, welcome everyone. And you can chat there and just have conversation with your peers. And if you have any specific questions for the team here, go ahead and use the Q&A at the bottom. Click on that. You can ask a question. If somebody's already asked a question that you're interested in, you can go ahead and like it and give it a little bit more weight as well. And then Lance and Mark will join those questions up to the group as well when the time permits. And then as far as other engagement, that's the 2 key ways to get involved. We don't have any video, so you shouldn't be concerned about that. And we likely won't bring anybody into the conversation today, but if we do, you'll have to unmute yourself in order to do that. So those are the best ways to get involved in the conversation today, and hope you enjoy it. Back over to you, Lance.
Thank you, Tori. And Mark, you are correct. Tori is much better at that than you are. So
Lance, are you muted?
Good call on that. Today, we're not going to spend too much time on introductions because everybody knows our cast of characters for our reunion show today. So I'm just going to go ahead and do a quick brief introduction. Today, we'll have Ken Andrus, NCAA Secretary of Rules Editor, NYSOA Hall of Famer. We will have Dr. Todd Abraham, NYSOA Senior Director of Instruction, as well as NYSOA Hall of Famer. We will have Tori Penso, NYSOA's Managing Director and 2019 NCAA Division I Women's College Cup Final Referee. And we will have Chris Penso, NCAA assigner for Division I and NAIA, as well as 2-time College Cup referee final. So first off, we're going to start what we normally do is our State of the Season update with Ken Andrus. Ken, take it away.
Good afternoon, everyone. The state of the season is still unknown. I wish I could give you something more specific, but the NCAA hierarchy met last week, and they decided that they were going to wait until at least their next meeting, which will be this week, the week of August 3rd. But it is undetermined whether or not fall sports will take place at this time. For those of you who have been following it, it doesn't look promising for Division III because so many conferences have decided they're not playing fall sports. Division II, there has not been much activity. And Division I, it's been hit or miss. You know, for instance, the Ivy League, the Patriot League, the America East, and some others have decided they're not going to play. And this week, the ACC announced that they're going to play a modified conference-only season. So the answer at this point is we do not know. So I encourage you to keep following the NCAA Soccer Central website, and I will make sure that I communicate with NYSOA to make sure that all of your 5,000 members know what's going on. So keep preparing, keep following the rules, and stay tuned.
All right, Ken, were you going to talk about the rule changes in general, or you want me to hop in and do that?
Yeah, I'll do it very briefly, folks. I know we're going to try to be a little more specific and zero in on questions this week, but a brief recap so that everyone who may be new or hasn't had a chance to learn from these seminars is aware of the changes. First, under Rule 1.12.4, members of the official coaching staff can communicate electronically from off-site. 2, video review can be used this year to correct timing issues. So this is bullet point number 5 as to what we can review. And note, timing issues must be corrected at the next stoppage and before the next restart. Rule 5.8.1, protests. Now limited to 2 specific instances: player identification or misidentification, as the case may be, and illegal participation by ejected or suspended student athletes, coaches, or team personnel. Now, dealing with Rule 9, massive changes with regard to restarts and drop balls. We'll have a segment on that, going back over things. We had a great segment where we went over that at some length with Chris and Tori, but you've got to pay attention now because essentially we have adopted the IFAB changes with restarts and drop balls. Handballs, again, very significant changes, most particularly dealing with what is an accidental handball and how will it impact play when an attacking player accidentally handles a ball. We'll address that today, so pay attention as well. Very significant change, and I think the one that is different from all other governing bodies. This year, we have gone back to the old definition of fighting. My term, a fight is a fight is a fight, and a 2-game suspension. We now have 2 different categories of violent behavior: violent behavior 1 and violent behavior 2. Violent behavior 1, I would characterize as what we've always thought violent behavior to be: unwarranted excessive force when not challenging for the ball, period. Violent behavior 1, and it winds up with a 1-game suspension. New, important, violent behavior 2, unwarranted excessive force, same as violent behavior 1, which is so extreme and severe that it places a participant in danger of physical injury. So now you need to look at how severe is it? Is it deliberate? Is it likely to cause injury? And when that happens, you will call it as violent behavior 2, and it will wind up in a 2-game suspension. That's it from the highlights show. We'll also talk briefly, about penalty kicks. We've got certain issues involving positioning of the keeper, 1 foot on or behind the line, and transgressions by the kicker or the attacking team. If you go to the NCAA Soccer Central Hub, there's a document called 2020 and 2021 Major Rules Changes for Men's and Women's Soccer. You will see the highlights, and now the books are out. So everything is there. Study hard, do well. Done.
And I want to cover now some of the changes that are not adopted by the NCAA, because we have to recognize that there are still some differences here that the NCAA has not put into their rules. So the NCAA still requires that substitutes leave the field at midfield on the bench side of the field. This is a player safety issue. We don't want players leaving the field on the fan side, even though this year we won't have any fans. We still want the players to leave at the bench side of the field if they're able to. Of course, if they're injured and they can't leave that way, they can move off the field wherever they are. If a player is taking excessive time, you still have it within your right to stop the clock to make sure that that substitution event is not a time-wasting event. The NCAA requires that injured players, that injured players who are attended on the field leave, except for the goalkeeper, and cannot remain in the game to take a penalty kick. This is different from the IFAB law change. So if a player is injured and the situation of that injury results in a penalty kick, that player must still leave if he is attended to on the field. I also want to remind everyone that the substitute, if the player is substituted for, may not take that penalty kick either. One of the players who was on the field at the time the foul occurred must be the player taking the penalty kick. So again, this is a difference between the NCAA rules and the IFAB laws, and we have to make sure we get this one right. The NCAA also requires that a caution be issued at the next stoppage of play and not be delayed to allow a promising attack to continue. Again, a difference from the IFAB laws, and we did get some questions on that, so we'll cover it in more detail. But that caution or ejection must be issued before the next restart. And so at that stoppage of play, even if you allow play to continue for advantage, at that stoppage of play, you must issue that card if you're going to issue it. And lastly, the NCAA requires that any misconduct that occurred during the game carry over to the tie-breaking procedure in those situations where we do have a penalty kick tiebreaker to determine which team advances. So again, this is different from the IFAB laws, which has broken out the tie-breaking procedure from the actual game itself and resets misconduct for those tie-breaking procedures. So again, I just want to remind everybody these differences still exist. Please make sure you're aware of the differences between the IFAB laws and the NCAA rules. And the reminder I have to give every one of these clinics is you may not like the differences, you may not like the rule changes, but we have to operate by the NCAA rulebook. That's what we're expected to do. So operate by the NCAA rulebook, whether you agree with these changes or not.
And if I can just follow up with Todd on that. In my position as the Secretary Rules Editor, I am also the rules interpreter. So what you are hearing and what we are telling you is the official position of the NCAA on these rules. So when we're telling you this is the interpretation, respectfully, it's mandatory.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you, Todd. So now this is where we get into the live question and answer session. I have selected questions based on the survey that the membership was sent out. The membership had about 3 days in order to send back questions that they may have from the session 1, 2, 3, as well as other playing rules questions and COVID-related questions. So we have quite a few questions that we have to answer today. We're going to break it down into sessions. So the first set of questions is session 1. Session 1 dealt with general rule changes overview, IFAB, NCAA similarities and differences, as well as the handball rule change. Now, all of our recordings for the webinars, if you were unable to attend or you want to go back and review the material, that information can be found on NYSOA's educational YouTube channel. And that is, everyone is posted up there, and we expect and we hope that everybody will go back and review these sessions. So question 1, with the new protest rule only accounting for player ID and illegal participation by ejected or suspended personnel, does re-entry by a player when they are not permitted to re-enter count, say in the first half or the second time in the second half, as a coach being able to protest due to identification? Ken?
The answer is no. Under the new rule, we are referring to players, coaches, bench personnel who are ineligible to participate in the game because of a suspension. So if there is an error which is made in allowing a sub to re-enter, that is not protestable. Making it all the more important that you and your crew make sure that subs who are on the field are legal in terms of substitution. No, we have reentry that's different than IFAB. I understand it makes it more difficult to keep track of players, but the NCAA has made the decision. We want student athlete participation. Does that make it more difficult for us to count? Yes, but it is nevertheless our responsibility. But the answer to the question is no, it's no longer protestable, so we got to get it right on the field.
Thank you, Ken. Any recommendations on how to handle a situation where a suspended coach is suspected of communicating via cell phone with the team, coaches, and/or bench personnel during the game? Ken?
Yes, if you believe, or if someone tells you, as in an opponent coach believes, that the coach is illegally communicating, your job is to say thank you for the information and report it. You will report it to your assigner, to your conference, and to me, and you will include it in your game report. It is not your job to conduct an investigation, and it is not your job to deal with any transgressions. Don't get in the middle of this. Make sure that you acknowledge the person making the complaint. Make sure that you tell them that you will write it up and you will bring it to the attention of the necessary parties, but it is not something that you are empowered to deal with on the field.
Thank you, Ken. Next question, and this is actually put in the question and answer box as well, so it's perfect timing. Please confirm that the NCAA has not adopted the IFAB's change that downgrades DOGSO and SPA cards in the case of advantage or a quick restart by the offending team. Todd, would you like to take this one?
Yeah, as I mentioned, this is a change that the NCAA has not adopted. So if you have a situation where you want to give a yellow card for denying an obvious goal-scoring opportunity or stopping a promising attack, at that next stoppage, you should give the card. If the team wants to restart quickly, you cannot then come back and give that card at a later time. Can you determine whether that card is warranted if the team starts quickly? Yes, you may. So if you believe that it didn't actually stop the promising attack because play has restarted quickly, then correct, you don't need to give that yellow card. But you can't decide later that I'm going to come back and give that yellow card for stopping a promising attack or DOGSO. Similarly with a foul, that the card is for a different kind of misconduct. A foul warrants a yellow card in and of itself, but the team wants to play quickly. That yellow card must be given at that stoppage of play. There may be an advantage situation, in which case you can come back, but if play is stopped to deal with that foul, you must give the card there. You can't allow a promising attack to continue and come back and give the yellow card for the foul.
The rationale here is that the NCAA views this as misconduct, wants it to be dealt with, and wants to eliminate it.
Excellent. Thank you. Handball. Please clarify the handball rule that gives an attacker an immediate goal scoring opportunity. Since the rule says accidentally hits a player's hand, then I assume even if his hand is in a natural position and the ball hits it and he has a goal scoring opportunity, then that is considered that variation of a handball. Chris?
Yes, Lance, I'd be happy to take this. So there's really no considerations outside of immediate goal scoring opportunity for attacker handball other than did it hit his arm or hand. In the event that it does, we blow the whistle and give handball offense. As a general rule of thumb, pretty much anywhere in the final 25 yards of the field or attacking third, practical refereeing says just to blow the whistle and give the offense, because that close to goal, say the attacker handles the ball, takes a touch, it's in the back of the net. By the time it's in the back of the net, if you're still thinking about it, it's going to look a little sloppy as opposed to if we had just blown the whistle right when the ball touches the arm. So there's no considerations outside of did it hit his arm in the attacking third of the field, and if it does, it's attacker handball.
Thank you, Chris. And just to reemphasize that we are talking about the attacker. The attacker, okay? Remember, we discussed the differences between the attacker and the defender accidentally handling the ball. Okay, so please go and review the webinar series from session 1 for more clarification on attacker versus defender. This question, please clarify the handball rule that gives an attacker an immediate goal scoring opportunity. Since the rule says accidentally hits a player's hand, then I assume even if his hand's in natural position, yeah, blah, blah. We answered this one. But here specifically, how far back in sequence from the goal scoring opportunity should the ref consider that kind of call? Chris had already answered that, so we can move on to the next one. Per the new handball rules, a goal cannot be scored and a goal scoring opportunity cannot be created from a ball touching an offender's hand or arm. My question is, what is the limit of touches prior to the goal or the goal scoring opportunity that should be considered? Chris had already discussed this one as well. So now we are on session 2. Session 2 talked about video review, talked about violent behavior 1, 2, and fighting. This can also be viewed and reviewed on NYSOA's educational YouTube channel. Is there a minimum standard that the referee should expect if a college claims they have video review? Ken?
No. If a college tells you that they have video review available, you say thank you and you use it. And it will either be sufficient to give you the information you need, that you will have clear and convincing evidence, or you do not. Okay? Simple question. Do you have video review available today? If the answer is yes, your answer is thank you very much. And then it's your discretion to use it when you think it is necessary. If it helps, wonderful. If it is technically inferior or insufficient, that's the way it goes.
And you make it lucky.
Can I add something there?
Go ahead, Tori.
So one other thing is making sure that we review the video that is available during your pregame walk. So as you walk the field, after you've already asked that question Ken has addressed, and the answer is yes, make sure you take the time and allow enough time during your walkthrough to go to the video area, figure out where the booth is, find out what the headset looks like, find out who you're communicating with, find out what your angles of view are. So in the event during the game that you have to go to the review and see it, you are more familiar with that stadium's capabilities. And as Ken said, you should definitely go and view it when those capabilities are there. So even if your goal line view is subpar, you may be surprised at what the video can capture. So even in the event that it's not as good as you would hope, it's still important that we go and use it. Okay?
Yeah, and just to build on what Tori is saying, we had that situation come up when we first introduced video review, where the video camera in one field was behind one goal. And it was perfectly positioned to catch a ball in or out of the goal at that end of the field where the issue happened to have taken place. There would have been no way that video could have been used at the other end of the field, but it didn't need to be. And so all you deal with is the information you have. You don't say, well, we can't use it because it's only on one end of the field and not the other. You don't say we can't use it because I'll only be able to see this goal and not that goal. You use what you got.
Look, when you have a situation which you think warrants video review, try it. It can't hurt.
It's going to be what the teams use to prove you wrong, so you might as well look at it while you still have a chance to change it.
Yes, thank you. Second question. Once a video review is initiated, can the referee, as is with IFAB, come to any conclusion about the previous play, i.e. review for a goal and then the replay shows that an offside occurred in the APP? Ken?
No. In a nutshell, there are 5 instances when we can go to video review. When you're looking at, for example, is there a goal? The question is simply, it's not, is it a, quote, good goal in terms of development of play or technical violation? The inquiry is simple. Did the entire ball cross the line before the expiration of time? That's it. You cannot go back to determine whether or not there was an offside. Now, to differentiate this, you also know that you can go back to determine whether or not there was a fight or violent behavior. That includes violent behavior 1 or 2. The distinction being, when you go to look at violent behavior or a fight, you've now opened the proverbial door. So once you go in to determine was there a fight, you can deal with other issues of misconduct, of violent behavior or fighting. And parenthetically, you can also look at player identification. So once you go in to look for fighting, violent behavior, you can look at those issues. You can identify and deal with all of the bad actors. And you can also use it to double check and make sure you have the right players.
Thank you, Ken. Next question. Why isn't violent behavior 1 and 2 in fighting grouped into one category, and then we let the match commission/conference determine the length of the suspension?
Lance, before we go to this, I'm sorry, I was on mute. I was trying to weigh in here. There was a question that came up in the chat. I just want to address here because we've talked a lot about the fact that we don't determine whether the video review equipment is quote unquote good enough. And so the question in the chat is if it's available in the press box or something, is that acceptable? I just want to remind people to go back and read the rule book around video review, which is in 5.7.2. In order to use video review, the review equipment must be provided by the home institution and be available at the scorekeeper's table or field level. So just remember that. You cannot go up to the press box to be reviewing video information. It must be available field level, either at the scorer's table or somewhere else at field level, which to Tori's point before is something you ought to check out before the game as part of your walk around the field. Because if the home institution says, yeah, we've got video review, and then you go to do video review halfway through the game and you say, okay, where's the video review? And they say, well, it's up in the press box on the computer that the scorekeeper is using, you're in trouble. So make sure you understand exactly where that is before the game starts, because the rule is very clear about the fact that this must be at the scorekeeper's table or field level.
Tori and Todd are both, as part of your pregame, make sure you know where it is. And if it's not in the correct place and readily available for you, then they have not provided video review.
And those cameras should not be moved once they're in place for the game. I mean, there was a question, can they move it? We talked about the goal line situation. They can't only have the camera for the goal that their team happens to be shooting at. So it may move along the sideline or something like that, along the touch line, that's fine. But to take the capability from one end of the field to move it to the other end of the field at halftime is not acceptable. Right, Ken?
Correct. What would have happened if I said no?
I would have said, that's why you're the rules interpreter, and we always check with you for any final decision.
Thank you, guys. Why isn't violent behavior 1 and 2 fighting grouped into one category and then let the match commission/conference determine the length of the suspension based on the post-game match report? Ken?
Because number one, in college soccer, we don't have such a thing as a match commissioner. We play games that involve non-conference opponents. So I would ask you, how well do you think it would work if you have two conference commissioners or two ADs trying to determine what happened the player from team A versus team B? So the clear answer is we don't have the capability to do that. And the Rules Committee decided, since we don't have the capability to do that, it's going to be the responsibility of the referee. And again, we talked about this before. We don't want you getting into, I'll say it's a moral or ethical dilemma. Does this warrant a 1 or 2 game suspension? Should I be making sure this player doesn't participate in the next 2 games? No, that is not your decision. Your decision is, for instance, in violent behavior 2, is this act or conduct, does it reach the level of violent behavior that includes, and what are the 3 terms? Premeditation, malice, and severity. When that happens, it's a violent behavior too. That's what you call it. And then you do your job. It is not your responsibility to determine the extent of a penalty or impose it. Was it premeditated? Was it done with malice? And was it severe and likely to cause injury? If those boxes are ticked, it's violent behavior too. That's the end of your involvement. Do your job and let other people do theirs.
Thank you. Next question. What will be the referee's recourse for a player who weaponizes coughing or breathing on or at an opponent with the intention of intimidating that or scaring that opponent with the risk of spreading COVID?
Yes, you do have the opportunity and, in fact, the responsibility to deal with that. This is violent conduct, violent behavior. When you see this happening, you have to deal with it. And it is a good analogy with the blood protocol that warranted a red card. You need to be in tune with this, with what's going on in the real world. And the NCAA is adamant about protecting the student athletes, coaches, referees, and bench personnel. We know how serious this issue is. If someone, to use this term, weaponizes coughing, breathing, spitting, you have to deal with it, and you have to deal with it at the highest level possible.
Thank you. Next slide. Here we go. It has been stated in the past that when a player who causes a fight, i.e. commits the offense/foul that leads to a fight, should be sanctioned with a red card under the principle of equal justice, equal punishment. Is that guidance still in effect? I believe this question is more focused on the principle of equal justice, equal punishment.
And I'll take this one because I think one of the things I published last year was the basis for this question. The situation which we talked about last year when we were talking about fighting versus, at the time, versus violent behavior before we had violent behavior 1 and 2 was a situation where a player committed violent behavior against an opponent, and that opponent then turned around and punched the player who initiated the fight or initiated the situation. In that case, we wanted equal justice for those players. One player shouldn't get a 1-card violent behavior 1 suspension while the other player gets a 2-game fighting suspension. So the notion that you had equal justice there is the foundation for which this question came. But we don't want people reading into this question that any time there's a fight, 2 players must be guilty of fighting. So if there's a simple yellow card situation, or maybe even a simple foul that doesn't even warrant a yellow card, and the opponent gets up and punches somebody, that's fighting. That player gets ejected for fighting. In that case, the initiator most likely gets either a yellow card or nothing at all, depending on what the severity of that precipitating action was. This is a situation where equal justice reflects the fact that 2 players are going to get ejected. Both of them should get ejected at the same level of severity. And I'll let Ken weigh in on this as well, because I know this is a bit of a subtle distinction, and I want to make sure that we really flesh this out so everybody understands. This is important for people to recognize. The fundamental principle here is that it doesn't require 2 people to be in a fight. That's one of the things the fighting rule this year has clarified. If 1 player turns around and punches somebody, that 1 player goes off for fighting.
Thank you, Todd. Don't construe this concept of equal justice as requiring equal punishment. When we've talked about this in the past, we've often looked at who would be the instigator So for instance, player one does something which instigates player number two, either committing violent behavior to, or any type of violent behavior, or a fight. When that happens, you have to deal with the instigator and make sure that some type of disciplinary action is taken when it's warranted. So if I come up to you and I do something that warrants a caution, I push you open-handed in the chest, not violently, and then you turn around and punch me. It's still going to be a fight for you, but you also have to deal with me in a disciplinary matter. And under those scenarios, it'll be a caution. Could be different. I could come up and commit violent behavior one, push you commit an act which is excessive, but not premeditated, not with malice, not likely to cause injury, which could warrant a red card for me, and your response could warrant a violent behavior two or a fight. So don't confuse this with putting the same degree of responsibility and the same punishment. What we want you to understand is that when you have more than one player involved in the event, the equal justice concept requires you to deal with all of those players, not just the one who does the worst act. And you don't necessarily elevate what player number one did to what player number two did. So think about this. You're looking for instigators. Instigators should not get off scot-free. But if you instigate something and then the response is worse, you'll deal with them separately in terms of how you categorize them, and then you let the punishment fall where it does.
Excellent. That was very well detailed answer by both Ken and Todd. And one point I'd like to make as well, as we talked about this in session 2, is a term we use in CONCACAF is initiators, instigators, and aggressors. And you have to be able to identify those parties that are the reason for that mass confrontation. And that will help you formulate a plan and determine who needs to be sanctioned. Last week, it was stated that spitting at an opponent is now violent behavior too. And while I know spitting at the referee is referee assault, what about spitting at another person, i.e. teammate or spectator?
Violent behavior does not have to involve an opponent. Right? Everybody's good with that, right? Since violent behavior does not have to involve an opponent, spitting at another person, teammate, spectator, or team personnel is violent behavior too. Don't make this complicated. Good question, but don't make it complicated. Key being violent behavior can go against anyone. Doesn't have to be an opponent. You know spitting is a flashpoint now. It may be a flashpoint for the rest of our lives. If you don't deal with this appropriately, I would suggest that you're probably not going to have a good day at the park. So recognize it and deal with it appropriately.
Thanks, Ken. Rule 12.7.4.2, spitting at or biting an opponent or at any other person. Since spitting at is considered violent behavior to ejection, as we spoke, should we assume that biting is also a violent to ejection? Ken and Todd. Todd first.
Yes.
Next
Very
question.
Very simple. I mean, it's the same thing. You can't do this stuff in this environment. You can't do this stuff anytime. I mean, this is something that we just can't even think about tolerating. So there's no reason this would not be our most egregious penalty. So this is violent behavior too.
All right, now we're on to session 3. Session 3 involved restarts and mechanics, and it can also be the webinar can also be reviewed on the NYSO Educational YouTube channel currently. Since the ball no longer has to leave the penalty area or on a goal kick or free kick to be in play, what would happen if the goalkeeper kicked the ball to a teammate located inside the penalty area and then the teammate flicked the ball up and headed the ball back to his goalkeeper or her goalkeeper? Mark Cahen?
Yeah, I'm here. All right, illegal second touch by the goalkeeper. So this one is something that was recently just clarified in the laws of the game changes 2020, 2021 by the IFAB. And so it says that if the goalkeeper takes a restart and then deliberately plays the ball a second time before it has touched another player, and this illegal second touch stops a promising attack or denies a goal or an obvious goal scoring opportunity, then in addition to the indirect free kick, the goalkeeper must now be cautioned or sent off as appropriate. So the yellow card, red card applies even if the second touches with the hand or arm, as the offense is not handball, but illegally playing the ball a second time. So now the question really is regarding goal kick or free kick taking by the defending team inside the penalty area. So we all have to understand that the goalkeeper has the same restrictions on handling the ball as any other player outside the penalty area. If the goalkeeper handles the ball inside their penalty area, when not permitted to do so, an indirect free kick is awarded, but there's no disciplinary sanction. However, if the offense is playing the ball a second time with or without the hand or arm after a restart before it touches another player, the goalkeeper must be sanctioned if the offense stops a promising attack or denies an opponent or the opposing team a goal or goal scoring opportunity. Does that help clarify that?
Well, according to the chat group, it looks like you may have been a couple questions ahead of us.
Oh, so are we talking about trickery?
Yes, this is the trickery one.
Sorry, that's my
This one's a
mistake.
lot easier of an
Welcome to
answer.
the webinar,
Wow.
Mark.
Sorry about that one. It's been a long day of webinars. So a flick up. We're talking about a flick up.
Yes.
Apologies. Let me see if this thing's working.
Okay, you'll get a chance to answer the next one again.
Okay, great. So if at a goal kick or a free kick, the goalkeeper flicks the ball up and a teammate heads or chests the ball back for the goalkeeper to catch, the kick is retaken. There's no disciplinary sanction unless it occurs persistently. What is persistently? If it happens 2 or 3 times throughout the game, it's considered persistently.
Now, having said that, that is the answer for this question for the time being, so that we're in alignment with IFAB. But Ken, you are going to run this past the Rules Committee, is that correct?
Yes, you need to assume that we will follow the IFAB interpretation here. I will get this back in front of the committee. I don't know when, but unless and until you hear from me, we will follow the IFAB interpretation here.
Thank you. Those of you, this question was submitted because of a clip that occurred, or a situation that occurred in a match last year, probably at an International Champions Cup game, where the goalkeeper was taking a goal kick, passes it to his teammate who's inside the penalty area, which is legal, but then the player then, whether he juggles it up or it's been flicked up to him, heads the ball back to the goalkeeper to be picked up. So Ken will be getting back to us on an official final answer, but in this case right now it is with the IFAB, which is which is a retake. Sorry.
It's the official temporary answer.
Official temporary answer. I like that. Okay, Mark, this is where you get the repeat. Amy Willing from Michigan wants to know if you can, if your answer is going to be the exact same as that you told us before. So we're going to test you on this one.
This isn't his question though.
This is your question.
All right.
Can you explain the restart and misconduct issued for when a second touch by the same player after taking of a goal kick or free kick inside the penalty area? So if you have a goal kick and the goalkeeper miskicks it, but then touches it a second time before anybody else does. Can you explain
Okay, I got this one. Okay, so it's the same thing I said before, but the shortened version is it's an indirect free kick restart. Now, to take it one step further, if in the event this second touch stops a promising attack or denies an obvious goal scoring opportunity, then the appropriate misconduct would be given. How's that?
We'll have to find out from Amy Willing in the chat if she accepted
Yes,
that.
sounds good enough. I did it.
Okay, good.
Hey, what's the appropriate misconduct mean?
Amy, are we going to bring her on to explain that? Or do you want?
No. Go ahead.
Go for it, Mark. You said it quickly before. So if it stops a promising attack, it's a yellow card. If it denies a goal scoring opportunity, an obvious goal scoring opportunity, it's a red card. This
That's
does
correct.
not get downgraded because the resulting restart is not a penalty kick. It's an indirect free kick.
That's correct. Thank you for answering the question for me, Todd.
And I think that's critical, folks. This is not a PK. It's not a handball.
Indirect free kick.
The PK table on page 82 says that illegal feinting by the kicker results in an IFK and warn/caution kicker as appropriate. Does illegal feinting include stopping, Ken?
You can't stop. Stopping is illegal. It is not a soccer move. Period.
And if so, okay. All right, they answered that one too. That one didn't apply to it. Next. Drop ball. I believe defenders will rush the player receiving a drop ball as soon as the ball hits the ground, giving the player little time to gain possession or make a pass. Any suggestions on mechanics to ensure defenders maintain a 5-yard distance and don't interfere with the drop ball? This question we're going to ask our drop ball expert from the NWSL Challenge Cup, Tori Penso.
Well, thanks, Lance. So ultimately, I think in the webinar, we talked a little bit about best practices and how to manage this, right? And at the end of the day, I think one of the attendees used the term kind of coaching, if you will. I think that's a good word, right? These rules are new for all of us, including us as officials, right? And so if we need to take the time to explain it to everyone, and this isn't a 5-minute explanation, right? It's just, hey guys, new rule, friendly reminder, you've got to stay a bit away, right? And just kind of push them off, use your hand signal so everyone around can see it, be proactive in that, and just friendly remind them it's a new rule. And I think when you say a new rule, people are like, oh, this is different because I'm used to as a drop ball approaching, right? And I will say from experience, having done this a few times now, everyone seems to receive it really well. So there hasn't really been an issue with this as long as you're communicating effectively, you're being proactive about it, and you're not going to restart until they back up anyway. So, I would manage it as best as you can with your personality. And I would assume that everyone is treating this as an old drop ball when they approach quickly. And if you see that, just, hey guys, just a friendly reminder, it's, new drop ball. Everyone needs to back up some, please. And I think that'll work. We've seen it kind of happen across the globe, if you will, because these laws are happening in IFAB as well. And I think everyone's done a fair job of that. And it's new for us all. So let's give everybody a little time and space to adapt to that as well and make sure that we take ownership of making sure we're being really good communicators of it.
And just remember, I mean, this came up in the chat, just remember that the ball isn't live until it hits the ground. So if the defender is trying to get a jump on this, you can just say you were within 5 yards before the ball hit the ground and redo the drop ball so that so the player does effectively have time to gain possession.
Thanks, Todd. And just a friendly reminder, look around you too. Behind you, make sure you do kind of a 360 look. You don't want anybody creeping in from the backside as well.
Thank you. Okay, this one is for Chris Penso. If the ball touches the referee inside of the 6, which we know as the goal area, during a promising attack, will the ball be dropped at the top of the 6-yard for the last player who had the ball for the attacking team? First off, Chris, I don't know of any referee that is getting inside of the goal area, the 6, during dynamic play, nor do we recommend you to be there during play. But Chris, go ahead and answer this one.
Sure. So, Lance, you're onto this a little bit here. Let's break it down bit by bit. If the ball is in the goal area, which is the 6, it's probably more than a promising attack. It's probably an obvious goal scoring opportunity. More importantly, as you said, if play is in the goal area, as referees, we probably don't want to also be in there because it's going to be a bit busy. General positioning principles, right, and guidelines says that in the final third of the field, we want to be square to the end line, have play in view, and really not go any further than around the top of the penalty area. Anytime we go there, and there's one-off instances where we might want to go there, but as a general rule of thumb, anytime we go deeper than that, we're going to end up being in the way in a passing lane or run the risk of getting hit by the ball. But to the question, if we are in the 6 goal area for some reason or another, and the ball strikes us per the new rule, since the ball is in the penalty area, the ball is dropped to the goalkeeper.
Thanks, Chris. And that's
Chris,
important. It's
So
dropped.
don't get hit there.
Chris, drop to the goalkeeper, period, end of story, it's inside the box. Doesn't matter who had the last touch, anything else, correct?
That is correct.
So the rule avoids the nightmare, sort of.
All right. Next question involves drop ball as well. A goalkeeper attempts to clear the ball from their own penalty area. The clearance deflects off the foot of an attacker standing in the middle of the goal area. After the ball leaves the penalty area, but before any other player has touched the ball, the referee stops play for an injury. What is the correct restart?
Yep, good question. So going back to the root of the rule, since the ball was last touched inside the penalty area, again, the restart is a drop ball to the goalkeeper.
Excellent. Thank you.
Probably not a good idea to stop play at exactly that point of time.
Probably not.
But remember, and Chris has now said this every which way to Sunday, if you have a stoppage like this and the ball is in the area, the ball goes to the keeper. No matter who, what, where, why, when, ball goes to the keeper.
Correct. Yeah, so the location of the restart here will be where the ball was last touched prior to the stoppage in play.
Thank you. Can you explain situations where the ball hits the referee and a drop ball does not happen? We do not award a drop ball. Chris?
I can explain situations like that. So two instances where we will not have a drop ball, and that is if possession does not change, and as long as the ball hitting the referee does not create a promising attack for the team. So those two instances, as long as those two things don't happen, we can continue play.
Anybody like to add anything else? Tori? Is it Ken?
Yeah, I'd like you to think about this as an advantage, or my term, disadvantage. If it doesn't matter when the ball hits the referee, it doesn't matter and it shouldn't stop the game. If it matters where somebody gains an advantage or loses an advantage and it comes to their disadvantage, that's when you've got to stop play. But if it's a benign situation, it doesn't matter, play.
Thank you. Okay, this is the one people had a lot of questions on last time, and as well as filling out the form and submitting. What is the restart for when the ball touches the referee and leaves the field of play for either a throw-in or goal kick / corner kick? Ken, you want to take this one to start, and then Chris will add to your explanation.
Let's go the other way if you don't mind. Chris,
Okay.
you're up.
Yeah, I will. I gladly take this. So this is the $1 million question that I think may have been submitted about 1 million times between the last segment and today via the online submission. So we've got some wiggle room in the rule here, right? Which, as most of you are going to find out, it's a little bit contradictory to what IFAB says, but we want to dive a little deeper and go into what's practical. So the wiggle room in the rule here is, we have a drop ball if the team loses possession, right, from after the ball hitting a referee and the other team gains possession. So in theory, you would think that if team A plays the ball, hits off the referee, goes out for a throw, and team B's now gain possession. That, since the ball is out of play, kind of washes this out. But we have wiggle room in the rule, so we can say that, hey, it is going to be a change of possession. So practical refereeing here is to stop play before the ball goes out of bounds into touch, whether it's goal kick, corner kick, throw in, what have you. Blow the whistle, stop play, and give the drop ball. We avoid a litany of issues. I'd be hard-pressed to believe that a coach wouldn't give you a little bit of grief if the ball bounced off of you and went to the other team, went out for a throw-in for the other team. So practical refereeing here says, be smart, protect yourself, keep things simple. You've got the flexibility in the rule to bend the book a bit, as we always say in refereeing. So stop play, give the drop ball back to team A, and get on with it. Ken?
I agree completely with Chris's analysis. And if you look at, right, so what's the violation or the transgression at this point? It happened at the time the ball struck the referee. And that's where either somebody gained an advantage or they did not. So when you look at the equity of the situation, that's where the initiating event occurred, when it struck the referee. So that's where we want your restart to start from. And it's going to be a drop ball based in favor of the team that last touched the ball. Don't let this keep going. It's going to create problems.
Thank you, Ken and Chris, for that. And I'm just going to read from the rule book too on page 46, 9.3.2.3. If the ball touches the referee or another match official and goes into the goal, team possession changes, or a promising attack starts, a drop ball is awarded. It has nothing to do with IFAB, which IFAB clearly it says the ball has to stay on the field of play. Okay, so this is where the wiggle room that Chris was talking about, use practical application. And if you can anticipate the ball going out of bounds prior to, blow the whistle. But if the ball does leave the field of play and the possessions change because it hits the referee, give the drop ball. Now, Todd, would you like to talk about the assistant referee part of this?
So we've had some questions about the ball hitting the assistant referee on the field of play. And the answer here is don't be on the field of play.
That can't happen because the assistant referee can't be on the field of play.
Exactly. So the assistant referee who's standing on the touch line where he shouldn't be or she shouldn't be, get off the touch line. And if the ball hits you when you're standing on the touch line, you really weren't on the touch line, right? You were really one step behind it. So again, this is about being practical here as opposed to the letter of the rule. And proper positioning and mechanics are always important, but in situations like this, you can only cause problems if you get into that situation.
But if, God forbid, this happens, the assistant referee will be treated as a referee. The assistant referee is a referee for purposes of this rule. Just please don't ever let it happen.
Thank you. Next question. If the ball touches the referee and goes into the goal, and that's just the rule I just read, please give examples or explanations of what is meant by a promising attack starting. Tori?
Sure. So I think Chris alluded to this earlier. I think he did a really nice job as far as we head into the attacking third, right? I think we also showed a couple good clips in this session. If you didn't see it, please check it out on YouTube of a promising attack kind of starting. And that could just be you see the attack heading into the attacking third. It doesn't need to be, it's not defined in the rule book. So I think we have the liberty to determine what this means. And really, as soon as you see that team kind of change possession and they're starting to go towards the goal with it, and you're in that half, I would even say, definitely half, attacking third, absolutely. Go ahead and stop it. So I think we have some liberty here. It's not tightly defined, and I think that gives us the opportunity to read the game and do what the game needs and have a bit of what we call football understanding.
I also think if your reaction is, oh, shoot, or worse, then stop it. If you're thinking, boy, I wish that didn't happen, then that probably means you should stop it.
Perfect. And stop it quickly. There's no value in waiting until an attack happens and now you're stopping and bringing it back, right? Just stop it quickly.
Or even more basic, if you don't know, blow the whistle. If there's any chance someone is gaining an advantage or is being placed at a disadvantage, blow the whistle.
Take it one step further. A promising attack also includes the space ahead of you, the passing options, your teammates going along with you. So those are a few other areas that you can consider in is a promising attack starting.
Thank you, everybody. Now, we're on to the additional questions. These are questions that did not fit into either one of our 3 sessions. They more so have to do with playing rules questions, COVID best practices and protocols for the officiating collegiate soccer season. Now, we also know some of these answers are going to evolve as we get more clarity on the season. So just because this is the answer that you receive now does not necessarily mean this will be the answer when you take the field. So it's very important that you read all the emails that are sent to you by NYSOA as well as the NCAA, and frequently visit the NYSOA website and the NCAA Center Circle hub for more additional information and up-to-date and current information. So we're going to go ahead and get into these questions. Do waivers? There's a big question around waivers right now because of conferences asking referees to sign waivers and whatnot in order to officiate in their matches. Do waivers exonerate coaches, universities, and conferences from all responsibilities in case a referee does contract COVID-19 while at the match, if protocols are not followed by either team involved? Ken, since you are a legal expert here.
All right, a couple disclaimers. Number one, I am not answering this question on behalf of the NCAA, and I am not giving legal advice or an opinion. I would suggest to you that the issue of waivers is highly dependent on 2 things. It's dependent on state law, meaning the law where the event occurs. Believe it or not, different states have different interpretations about the enforceability of waivers. Moreover, different states look at the standards of the writing. For instance, what are the terms, the clarity of the terms, the fairness of the terms? So the short answer is it depends. It depends on what state law is being used to interpret this, and it depends on the specificity of the language. So there's no way to give you a blanket answer. The prudent legal advice would be for anyone who has a question on this to seek competent legal advice in the jurisdiction, the state law that's going to interpret this. I know that I am giving you an equivocal answer, but it's an accurate and equivocal answer. It depends. It depends on where you are, and it depends on the language itself within the agreement.
Thank you, Ken. And most importantly, we as referees need to follow the protocols. Need to follow the protocols that are put in place by conferences, the NCAA, and at the venues to make sure that we eliminate our liability. After the match, should match officials leave the field of play immediately to for safety reasons in order to avoid confrontations by coaches and players, much like other NCAA sanctioned sports such as football and basketball? Ken?
The NCAA wants you to use your discretion as to when you need to leave the field. Uppermost in your mind needs to be your safety as well as the safety of the student athletes. Remember, your jurisdiction over the game doesn't end when the final whistle blows. Now, I think one of the real questions we have here, we addressed last week when there are going to be some waivers this year for play. The two waivers that we know now are that team areas, coaching areas, are now going to be extended 20 yards from the midfield stripe to allow for social distancing. And the referee is not required, if it's a paper book, the referee is not required to sign the scorebook this year. It will probably be, emphasis probably, be asked that if it is safe to do so, and you can do it with social distancing, you confer with the scorekeeper and verify that the information is accurate. How do you do that? Mr. or Ms. Scorekeeper, what cards do you have? Confirm that. What score do you have? Confirm that. Thank you very much. If you can't do it safely on the field, do it with the sports information director the following day. Reach out for that person and confirm that you have the right individuals with the correct disciplinary cards and the correct score. So do not expose yourself. Do not expose a student or other person who is the scorekeeper. Now, as Lance led this part of the conversation, the NCAA Sports Science Department is working on best practices for all sports. There are multiple committees working on that that involve medical professionals as well as athletic administrators. So this is a definite stay tuned. Before the season starts, you're going to see something published. Again, you've got to monitor the NCAA Soccer Central Hub, and I will make sure that everything gets to NYSOA, so they will do their great job in distributing as they have been. So pay attention, it's in flux.
Let me add a few things, if I might, to this discussion. I think this is a few things I want to talk about here. One is, don't be afraid to get creative. And what I mean by that is, if there is a walkie-talkie at the halfway line to communicate with the press box, at the end of the game, take that walkie-talkie, move away from the players, and communicate with the press box, confirming what you have in terms of cards. You don't need to actually physically go up and see the scorebook. If you want the scorekeeper to call you on your cell phone after the game is over when you're safely away from the players, do that before you leave the site of the competition, where you still have jurisdiction. Be creative. If you don't want to give your cell phone number out, then get a cell phone number that you can call the scorekeeper and confirm the score that way. Additionally, there are probably some referee practices which we're used to that we should also revisit. You don't want to get in a player's face, for instance, when you're chewing them out. And I mean that literally. So you have to think about your conversations with players and how you make sure you stay far enough away from the player while still delivering the stern message you need to do. I'm not going to tell you exactly how to do that. I think you need to sort that out on your own, but you need to be cognizant of the fact you don't want to be right up in a player's face when you're talking about some issue that is a heated situation. If two players are confronting each other, you want to get them away from each other without you touching the players and without you getting in the middle of that situation and getting too close as well. So I think you need to think about some of these referee practices that we all use so that we can maintain the social distancing we have on the field, especially in situations that are a little bit more intense than some others, where we've been told, get in there and get close to players. We have to be a little bit more careful now and think about alternative ways to diffuse situations without necessarily getting right in each other's face.
And here's a bonus question for Ken. Can the crew opt not to start the match if it appears that the COVID guidelines are not being followed?
Yes. Think about this. If the NCAA or the conference issues guidelines and they are not being followed, the question is, can this game be played safely? In essence, you're asking me the same question. Is it too hot? Is it too cold? Is there lightning? Are the field conditions unsafe? So if the COVID-19 instructions are not being followed, and in your opinion, as the referee, the game cannot be played safely, then you don't play the game. What's the thing we always go back to? Student athlete safety. Now we're not just worried about getting 22 kids back in class that aren't wearing crutches. We just upped the ante with some of these potential issues. Now we want to look at, are we going to have 22 kids go on with a happy, healthy life? So very good question. Your job number one, always student athlete safety. Good question.
And to piggyback on that, question from Amy W. She's asking, will there be different protocols for different individual sports? For example, will football have different COVID protocols from the NCAA versus soccer, or would they be all the same?
Definite maybe.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, you're looking at things, for instance, masks are being debated right now. Clearly a different issue if you are a soccer referee running the middle, or arguably an AR, than football referees with regard to masks. So I would expect to see basic principles, but then I will expect to see some modifications made on a sport by sport basis. So again, you've got to follow NCAA Soccer Central Hub and the advice that we disseminate through organizations like NYSOA.
Excellent. Thank you. Next question. Will conferences be requiring match officials to have a COVID-19 test prior to officiating? Since we have an assigner on the panel today, I figured this would be a great time for Chris Penso to handle this question. Take it away, Chris.
Sure. Thanks, Lance. That question is going to be different for every conference that you work for. From what I've heard, there will be testing in SEC. There will be testing in ACC, the American, which is one of my two conferences that I sign. We're still working through that with the medical committee. And then the other conference I sign, which is the Sun Conference, an NAI conference. As it stands right now, we'll be doing self-reporting temperature checks in the morning for all officials, and then on-site temp checks at the venue 1 hour prior. So that question will be different from conference to conference. I think it's going to come down to a lot of things, whether it's turnaround for testing time for results. It's going to come down to a cost analysis for the schools. So there's a lot of issues at play, and there's a lot of medical committees that are discussing information, and that's just going to vary from conference to conference.
Thank you. Ken, Todd, would you like to add anything?
Correct answer.
Temperature checks, though, most conferences will have temperature checks at the field of play. So even if you're not traveling in on a plane, you will most likely be subject to a temperature check.
And so to that point, everybody should review the dual system of control mechanics, because there will be times that someone shows up at a game and their fever is elevated and there's either no fourth official there, or it so happens that you have two officials that have temperature issues. Make sure you're aware of the dual system of control and how you're going to deal with that. And I will tell you, we've had some discussions at some of the local chapter meetings that I've been able to participate in. The dual system of control requires much more activity on the part of both referees. It is not an easy day at the office. For an intercollegiate game, it's a much more difficult day at the office. And if you approach it like, I'm just going to sit on the touch line, even with the second to last defender, you talk about a bad day at the office, like Ken said before, it'll be a really bad day at the office. So you need to make sure that you are prepared and understand the requirements and the extra physical exertion required in a two-person dual system of control. And I also want to remind you, the NCAA rules do not allow for a club linesman, a club linesperson, a club alternate official. You cannot get someone out of the stands, even though there won't be stands. You can't get anybody who is not a certified official to run the other line for you and decide that you'll deal with their situation. You must use certified officials, and if you only have two, your only choice is to use a dual system.
All right, so here's your fallback position. Hopefully, if something untoward happens, you'll have a 3-person crew and you can just adjust. But under NCAA rules, Todd is accurate, you go to a 2-person system. So the first thing you do is pray. And then the second thing you do is make sure that you understand the positioning as best you can. And just being a very elderly person on this call who started with the 2-person system, you need to understand that the biggest weakness with that system is that if you are doing what you're asked to do with offside, you're going to be placing yourself in a position where you're going to be screened all day long. It's inevitable that you will be placing players between you and the ball. So that's got to be the uppermost thought in your mind, and you need to understand how to move into positions that will try to alleviate that. And the second thing that you need to understand about the 2-person system, you are not required, nor should you, stay on the touch line. There will be times, and perhaps most of the game, if you are running a 2-person game, you need to be on the field, and sometimes fairly far on the field. And I'd ask you to just, here's your analysis. Are you better off missing a call on a touch line or a call in or near the box? So I would suggest to you, when you answer that question, which should be pretty easy, you need to get on the field. Here, Tony S., hustle, pitch, and penetrate. Hustle, pinch, penetrate. Penetrate means get yourself on the field close enough to where you can deal with the game critical situations. You know, great, you missed the throw in. Oh, well. But I was there when we had an issue with a PK. And then the other part is, and the really, really tough part, is trying to work out with your partner, because in a 2-person system, theoretically, you're dividing the field in 2, but if you do that, that won't work, because you've got to look for your partner's back, and he or she's got to do the same thing for you. A lot of work, difficult situation. You're lucky to get off the field alive, but oh well. Someone asked a question, can you do a 1-person game in college soccer? The answer is yes. Good luck. But the answer is yes. You show up, it's all by yourself. You have to make sure that you let folks know in that situation that some of you may have worked in 1-person games. First thing you need to know, you got to let the defenders know, hey, you better not expect me to be getting all the offside calls right today. So if you're playing a trap or something like that, good luck to you, sir, or good luck to you, ma'am, because I can't be there. So just tip people off in that regard.
And
Offside
communicate
today is going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, and communicate to people how you're going to handle it. If I'm not sure, I'm going to always call them off. Or if I'm not sure, I'm always going to call them on. Just be clear. Don't be cryptic and let them try to figure it out. You're making that judgment before you start the game. So you might as well let the teams and the players know and let them adjust accordingly.
That's a really good point. I would argue that based upon the principles that we've been taught recently, if you don't know, he's on, right? I don't know, she's on, okay? But that's a really good point from Todd. Alert the defenders, alert the keeper that, look, you know this is going to be a problem today, and this is the way it's going to go, and it's going to go the same way at both ends of the field. Because don't forget, I mean, the coaches in the home institution, they can always say, all right, we don't want to play today with just one. That's their call. But they need to understand that the limitations, and you're going to do the best you can, but at a minimum, offside is going to be dicey at best.
One quick
Shannon,
comment.
yes, please.
Temperature checks. We had the situation at the tournament where we had to get temperature checks going in and out of the facility. And just a friendly reminder, in August and September, it tends to be very warm in some climates. So be aware of if there's a long walk to get to the facility, make sure you get in some shade and cool off before you take your temperature checks. I had a couple temperature checks that were above 100, and it wasn't because I had that temperature. It was just because I had a long walk to get to that facility and then stood and watched a game for 20 minutes in the direct sunlight. So my forehead was very warm. So just a friendly reminder that temperature checks, if you have a long walk to get there, or you have to go up a big hill, or if you're in the sun for a duration of time, maybe watching the game prior, be very mindful, make sure you get in the shade, and make sure your forehead has some time to cool off before you get that temperature check.
Thank you, Tori. Another question that was asked too was, do we communicate with our assigner if one of our crew members fails the temperature check, or do we just go ahead and go with the dual system? You should always communicate with your assigner. Depending on when the temperature check occurs, there may be, and the availability of officials, that assigner may be able to get you a third official. So please do not make the decision on your own to go with the dual system. That decision should come from your assigner. So always communicate with your assigner, and the more time you give your assigner, the better chances that a replacement can be found.
And if you have what I'm going to call a health issue, not only do you communicate with your assigner, you have to communicate with on-site game management. You have to let them know. You can't keep this secret. That, in my view, would be a serious transgression. We have a problem. My fourth, my AR, I'm running a temperature. What's your protocol? Okay, thanks, Ken. See you later. We're going to get somebody to replace you. We're not going to play today. That's going to be a decision that's made by the game administrator. Your job in that situation is to convey factual information.
And take your temperature before you leave your house. You know, that'll give you a good idea of what range you're going to be in. Now, as Tori had mentioned too, if you have a long walk and it's South Florida and it's 130 degrees out, then, you know, you're going to need to find some shade and be able to cool down before you can get that temperature check. But if you are failing your temperature check prior to leaving your house, that would be a good time to contact your assigner and let them know of that. Would you say that would be accurate, Chris?
Yes, for sure.
Okay.
And one more observation on this. if we play this year, there will certainly be fewer games to go around. I know everybody is going to be chomping at the bit and really wanting to get and do games. Please be smart about this. And it doesn't even need to be a temperature. If you're not feeling well, you have to get off that game. It's very clear now that medical science doesn't understand everything that's going on with this terrible disease. They don't know what the signs or symptoms are for sure. They don't know when you are going to show signs. If you're running a slight temperature, if you're feeling slightly ill, take yourself off the game. We're not talking about doing a game here. We're talking about keeping people healthy. Yourself, your family, your friends, the student athletes. You need to be smart about this.
And this is under the category of professionalism. We've talked a lot about professionalism, about the things you know and what others don't know about your condition. We talk about it usually in the terms of an injury, but in the terms of a medical issue like this is all about professionalism. And to Ken's point about this being a different year where we're going to have fewer games and the need for fewer referees, frankly, you also should consider your own personal situation. If you're going to put your family or yourself or loved ones in jeopardy because you will be traveling more, you will be putting yourself out on the road more, you will be interacting with people, and you have people at risk at home, consider not refereeing this year. Most of us, I will bet everybody in this call, not even most of us, everybody in this call, this is not the first year you've ever refereed, and for most everybody, it won't be the last year you referee. And so do what's right for you in the long term, do what's right for your family in the long term. This is about being a professional on and off the field, not only for the other players, but for your family and your loved ones. And it's really critical that you feel comfortable going to these games. All of us want to do those games. All of us want to be out on the field doing the big game. But if you can't keep your family safe, it's too much of a trade-off for anybody.
Thanks, Todd. Given COVID-19, what should we do if we see players spitting on the ground, not directed at anyone, but within a few yards of other players? Ken?
Warn them. If it's not something that is problematic, not directed at anyone, you've got to let the player know. We all know there are certain situations, you take a mouthful of grass, something, it's part of what happens. But if you see anybody making a production out of it or causing a problem, at a minimum, caution them. And if you think they're doing it in a way that is
Weaponizing,
then you can go red, you can go violent behavior 1 or 2, depending upon how it's done. But if you see someone who just, takes a mouthful of turf and gets up and is spitting grass out or something, talk to them. Hey, be careful, stop, that kind of stuff. Be smart about this. But if somebody just seems to be doing it for the heck of it, deal with it either as a warning or a caution. And if you think it is any way problematic, it's a red. And the only question is, what is the extent of the red?
Hydration breaks when people take that big swig of water and want to spit it on the ground. Remind them beforehand not to do that. They're in a group of players around the bench. Don't be spitting the water on the ground. I mean, again, this is some of the things that are different this year that we need to deal with. And again, if someone does, it's not time for a red card. It's a matter of, hey, just be smart, guys, gals. Move away from the other players. Move down the touchline.
that was a great point. It's a different year, and we cannot expect the players to change overnight for this year. So there will need to be some practical application. We need to be cautious, but at the same time, as Ken says, we need to take an approach where we need to remind them that it's not acceptable. Okay, for the fall 2020, if there are any college soccer games, which is a big if, are there minimum safety and health standards that the referee crew should expect from the host college/conference? Chris, do you want to take this one?
Yeah. So going back to the earlier question, I think the same thing applies here. It's going to be different from conference to conference. We're still waiting for the general guidelines to come out from the NCAA, and those will be somewhat sport specific. There will be some general guidelines that will come out, but then there will be sport specific guidelines. So just the best advice I can give is stay in tune with the conferences that you work for. If you work for several conferences, make sure you have all those different things, all those different guidelines handy. I'm sure a lot of them will overlap in what they expect, but minimum standards, I think everybody should expect to be temp checked, probably in the morning at home and probably on site. Conferences that have slightly bigger budgets, you're probably going to see at-home testing for at least referees, if not the whole crew. You're going to see a lot of differences when you get on site. You might not have access to locker rooms. There won't be any pregame handshakes. Won't be any pregame introductions as far as a walkout. There's going to be a lot of different things. It's going to be a different year. It's going to look really different. A lot of conferences, I think, are leaning on each other for things that we're going to do and we're not going to do. So just pay attention. And, as this has shown the last couple of months, things are going to change every day. So.
Thanks, Chris. Ken, would you like to add to that?
No, I think Chris is all over it. Again, you've got to pay attention. And this is the 9th time I've said it. Monitor the websites and then follow the rules.
Next question. If referee communications are provided by the home team, are we to use them? If so, what cleaning standards must be met? Todd?
Yeah, I think this is a situation where referees have to expect to protect themselves. You need to make sure that you're comfortable with the material you use. So I would advise referees to think about what's the standard they're going to be comfortable with. Buy some Lysol wipes. Clean things yourself. If you're concerned about the armband, the Volcaro armband on the communication device, you can buy your own Volcaro armband. Some conferences have required you to have your own earpiece so you can protect against that. If you don't like the armband touching your skin, you're worried about that, get some pre-wrap, put it underneath the armband, whatever you feel comfortable with. But I think you should expect to protect yourself. No matter how well the school's cleaning standards are, no matter how good a job they do at adhering to those standards, ultimately you're trying to protect your own health and safety. And there's no reason for you not to take the extra step to make sure you have processes and procedures in place that make you and your family feel comfortable that what you're doing at the field does not put anybody in your immediate circle in jeopardy. So I understand the question, but at the end of the day, the question is somewhat irrelevant. Assume that they haven't done things that meet your standard and do what you need to make sure you feel safe.
Are electronic whistles a requirement by the NCAA for officiating soccer this fall or spring?
Not now.
This is that evolving process that it could be, but right now it's not.
Correct.
Okay, next. Score sheets. We talked about this in one of the sessions already. How will score sheets be validated at the end of the game with a print copy? Will the crew have to sign? Or will the score sheets be emailed to the referee crew, Ken?
We talked about this earlier. It's one of the waivers this year that you do not need to sign. I would suggest that you communicate with the home institution before the game and ask this, or when you arrive, how are we going to do this? And then simply follow whatever the school says. Don't make a big deal out of this. You need to verify that it's accurate. However you do it, you're going to be instructed by the school, the conference, or the NCAA.
And Chris, how about your NAIA conference?
Still working on it. Chances are we won't have officials sign the box scores. They'll take a picture, send it in, validate it, and we'll go that route. So the goal here is to minimize touch points, right? So if we can minimize one more touch point, if it just so happens to be validating the box scores, then so be it. Going back to the earlier point that was made, chances are we'll validate via social distancing. We'll just have the referee confirm with the official scorer that everything looks right. Obviously the big thing is two big things, right? Score, misconduct. The two things we need to validate on the box score as officials, the two biggest things. So we'll have the officials validate the score verbally and then validate the misconduct verbally, and we'll consider it signed.
Thank you. So, are there any further questions or comments that would like to be explained or answered before we close from any of the panelists? Oh, Ken, there was one more question. We previously heard that conferences will allow social justice practice to occur prior to the game, kneeling during anthem, and uniform modifications during the game.
Really good question.
I guess this is a question for, does NYSOA want the referees to join in prayers in these practices if the schools ask for us to avoid these practices? I'm going to kick that to Todd Abraham on our executive board.
Well, I'm going to let Ken answer first what the NCAA's position is on this, and then I'll weigh in on what referees.
The NCAA position, and you can expect to see something like this coming out in writing. We talked about it, I think, last week. Mm-hmm. Under last year's uniform requirement, a player could wear one patch, and it had to be of a certain size, numbers front and back of a certain size, school nickname, and you were permitted to put the player's name on the back of the jersey. You should expect this year that the NCAA will permit social justice messages in place of a name. And you should expect another patch that's going to be authorized by the NCAA. I've heard talks about two things, and I'm just throwing this out. A patch which says EJ for equal justice, or BLM for Black Lives Matter. So the NCAA is going to approve something. Point being, there's expected to be permissible messaging on jerseys. You don't get involved in this. If you don't like it, that is not your job or responsibility. Either the schools or the conferences will monitor this. And the NCAA has very clearly said that you are not to interfere with any social justice messaging made by players. If a player, if he, she, or any school personnel decide that they want to take a knee, bow a head, whatever it is that they want to do, it is not your responsibility to become involved or enforce it. Todd?
And so NYSOA's position obviously is 100% aligned with that. And in terms of you as an individual referee or your referee crew, you should follow your convictions. And NYSOA's point of view is everyone has a voice that they can use, and that we want you to feel that you're comfortable with the actions that you take and not judge other action. So we don't want people saying, I'm not going to work with you if you kneel, I'm not going to work with you if you don't kneel. This is an individual decision that everybody on the referee crew makes for him or herself. And NYSOA's position is that everyone gets to make that judgment on their own. And aligned with the NCAA position, it is not our responsibility to adjudicate any of these social justice messages from the players, coaching staff, or participants.
Excellent. Thank you.
There are a couple of quick rule questions here that I'm just going to cover very, very quickly because I'm not sure where the confusion is. One is about the substitution rule for overtime on overtime reentry. If someone says the rule book is confusing, I think it's very clear that you are allowed no reentry in either overtime period. So if you participate in the first overtime period, you cannot re-enter in that overtime period, but you may play in the second overtime period. Those periods are separate periods, and so there is no re-entry allowed within each individual period. But if you're subbed in the first overtime period, you may play in the second overtime period. And the second one was a question about goalkeeper punting the ball. Someone said, well, isn't that a use of the hand? Once the goalkeeper drops the ball out of his or her hands, the hand is no longer involved, and the ball is put into play with a punt with his foot, and therefore a goalkeeper may score directly from a punt. That's not using the hand. The goalkeeper may not score directly from a throw, but may score directly from a punt. So just those 2 points that have come up in the chat that I just wanted to address quickly.
Thanks, Todd. So this concludes NYSOA's summer educational series. It was a total of 10 webinars specific to referee, assistant referee, and alternate official education. All recordings of these webinars can be found on NYSOA's YouTube channel. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel to receive real-time instant notifications of when education has been uploaded. I'd like to take this time to thank Ken Andrus for spending 4 weekends with us here. Ken, we really do appreciate your time and your efforts and your expertise, especially during such a year where we had a massive rule change overview, as well as during these difficult times with college soccer. So thank you, Ken.
You're welcome.
Additionally, Dr. Todd Abraham, you've been with us for all 4 sessions as well. We do appreciate your insights that you provide us specific to the collegiate game, as well as your knowledge of the rules and your expertise with NYSOA. So thank you.
Thank you, Lance.
And of course, the first family of NYSOA, sorry, Ted and Christina Uncle who are listening, Chris and Tori Penso. I can tell you right now, the fact that Tori was able to find time in her extremely busy schedule during while she was out in Utah to be a moderator and to be a presenter on these was a dedication to her and to NYSOA. So Tori, thank you. And Chris, of course, we always enjoy seeing you. Look at social distancing at its finest right there. So we always do appreciate both of your inputs. And like I said, you're the first family of NYSOA. So thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, happy to help.
And of course, my partner in crime, my bestie, my wife calls him my Biffles, Mark Cahan. I felt like we've moderated pretty much as many as we could together. I always do appreciate your prep work ahead of time to help make this a professional production, and as well as putting together the material for us. Mark, you did a fantastic job sourcing all of these clips and really putting together the talking points behind these clips under the guidance of Dr. Todd Abraham. So Mark, big accomplishment. Thanks, buddy. Appreciate it.
Hey, Lance, can I just jump in with one last thing?
Absolutely.
Obviously, I know that I am speaking to the choir, that everyone who is joining in and listening, this is such great stuff. Do us all a favor. Everybody's doing this on a volunteer basis. Tell your friends, tell your colleagues, and I'll speak New Jersey. It's got to be like, yo, this is good stuff. You can't be a college soccer referee and not listen to all this stuff. If you're going to be professional about this, you need to listen to these seminars. So please, if you appreciate everything that all these folks are doing, go out and spread the gospel and let everybody know. This is really, really high quality educational material. And respectfully, I don't know how you can be a competent college soccer referee without understanding and listening to this. End of
I know
sermon.
Lance is going to finish with a shout out to Doug. I'll let him do that, but I wanted to just I want to reiterate some of the thanks. First of all, Ken, we really do appreciate on behalf of NYSOA your active involvement with these sessions. To the point you made, you can't be a college referee and not hear this kind of stuff, and we can't do this stuff without the official position of the NCAA. So thanks for that. And of course, Mark, Lance, Chris, Tori, great work. And we've got the birthday girl on the call as well, with the best unicorn I've ever seen. So happy birthday, and what a great unicorn. And I'll let you finish up, Lance.
Thanks, Todd. A couple things. First off, there's going to be a survey time. It's survey time. Please fill out these surveys. This helps us when we evaluate our educational content, as well as how we package the education this year. Obviously, as Todd had mentioned and Ken had mentioned, look at the, I mean, my question is the unicorn hat going to be part of the NYSOA uniform this year? That is my question. And Ken, you don't have to answer that, but it looks good, so we might have to get you one.
It looks to me like that'll keep COVID away, if anything, Will.
You can make the horn 6 feet, and then everyone would stay 6 feet away.
Absolutely. So, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Doug and Lana, for your assistance. We couldn't have put together this, as I like to say, world-class production and material without your help. So a lot of work goes on the background, but in the prep before the week or during the week. And we really do appreciate your partnership with NYSOA this year as the official broadcast partner for NYSOA. So thank you very much.
We appreciate it as well. It's been great to be a part of it.
And so as we say that, please continue to review NYSOA's YouTube channel for education. Please frequently visit NYSOA.com. Please look for emails from the NCAA through Arbiter. Visit their NCAA central hub, as well as the emails that I send out. So we hope everybody stays safe. We hope that we can see everybody on the field soon. Thank you very much, and have a great rest of your weekend.